contribution of Ambedkar in introducing land reform. Ambedkar, through his speeches and writings, made the world aware of the exploitation and suffering of Indian farmers. Ambedkar was the first legislator of the first popular provincial assembly to introduce a bill for the abolition of agricultural tenants and securing occupancy rights to the tenants, who were the real cultivators. Ambedkar insisted on the abolition of landlordism, as it was economically wasteful and socially tyrannous. He said, "I too agree that after abolishing landlordism, the state must be the owner of the land and not the proprietor or the peasant. The natural consequences of the abolition of landlordism must be collective farming or cooperative farming. But we are too much individualists. The cooperative farming, though useful and improving in production, is regarded by the peasant as an aggression on our system. This is due to the individualist tendencies of our farmers. Though we abolished landlordism, we would not be able to build our economy on sound basis by such methods. The whole outlook of our peasants must be changed, then and then only we would be able to reap the fruits of our revolutionary attempt to throw off the yoke of landlords." Quoted in Ishita Aditya Ray, Sarbapriya Ray 2011. R Ambedkar and his philosophy of land reform and evelauation. Afro Asia Journal of Social Science, Vol. 2, 1. Under the present circumstances, landlordism could be eliminated only through a substantial reduction of the ceiling on landholdings. The bill also made provision for payment of reasonable compensation to cots for the loss of their ownership rights to minimize resistance from landlords against transfers of ownership of land. Let us understand the Kati System. In the Konkan region of Maharashtra, the Kati System governed collection of taxes and resolution of owner-tenant issue in agriculture sector. Katis collected tax on behalf of the government. Abolition of Watan system. Mahars of Maharashtra were the inferior holders of the Watan. According to the Watan Act, the holders of Watan were government servants. They were required to work day and night for all departments. For their hard work, they were given a piece of land as Watan. As a result of this practice, the Mahars lost self-respect. Ambedkar raised his voice against the Watan system under which the Mahars were to do trifling menial jobs and sundry works. He wanted the holders of Watan posts to be given Watan lands with land revenue assessment and they should be relieved from doing menial jobs. He vehemently said, "I can assure the House that the Mahar people are absolutely determined to have the bill. And I may tell my honorable friends that if the government refuse to liberate these people on grounds of finance, on grounds of convenience, or on any other grounds, that it will be a war between the Revenue Department and the Mahars. If this bill does not pass, I, for myself, am not going to be in the council. I am going to spend the rest of my time in seeing that the Mahars organize a general strike, and bring the honorable revenue members to feel that the principles of this bill are absolutely essential for the welfare of the Mahar people." Pages 87, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Writings and Speeches, Vol. 2. Land Reform in Independent India and Impact of Ambedkar's Philosophy on Policy Formulation at the Time of Independence. Over 80% of Indian population at the time of independence was engaged in agriculture and allied areas. Most farmers were poor and illiterate. They were either tenant or labor in most of the states due to the pro-landlord policy of the colonial government. The government's top priorities after the independence were introduction of land reform, rationalization of landholding and abolition of land fragmentation. Land reform in independent India was introduced in the first 5-year plan, in step-by-step method starting with abolition of intermediaries engaged in collection of tax and zamindars. The Indian government introduced land ceiling to rationalize distribution of land among cultivators of land. Surplus land available due to land ceiling implementation was distributed amongst the weaker sections of society, which was emphasized by Ambedkar and adopted by the Government of India. This strategy also helps in creating more employment in rural areas to the Dalits and deprived sections. The Government of India emphasized on implementation of land reform based on the principle of Ambedkar in each 5-year plan of the nation. This strategy also helps in creating more employment in rural areas to the Dalits and deprived sections. The Government of India emphasized on implementation of land reform based on the principle of Ambedkar in each 5-year plan of the nation. His views on landlordism, fragmentation and subdivision of landholdings, mode of farming and the system of village panchayat are of far-reaching importance. Various state governments introduced numerous land reforms measure in the last 70 years. The reforms have been successful in removing irregularities in land ownership. Farmers and agricultural laborers directly engaged in cultivation of crops become landowners of the excess landholding of their owner. The government introduced relief for land tenants and agricultural laborers by transferring ownership of land cultivated by them. Tenants have freedom to cultivate crops of their choice. The government also fixed the limit of land rent. It could not exceed 1/4 of total agriculture products. The government introduced ceiling on land owned by individuals. Land was primarily divided into two classes, that is, a land cultivated by tenants and B, land under direct cultivation control of landlord. The land under direct cultivation control by owner was further classified into two categories: land, which on breakup will lead to fall in production, land owned by landlord. It was suggested that tenants should become owner of land cultivated by them. It was suggested that land owned by landlords should be taken over by the state government and distributed among socially economical segments of society who have been struggling in managing their home, with small land owned by them. Relevance of Ambedkar's philosophy on land taxation, land reforms and landholdings. Land reform is a continuous process and reforms need to be introduced to meet the changing needs. The Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India, is the nodal unit to coordinate implementation of land reforms through state governments. However, states are given special privileges in introducing land and small holdings reforms. Land reforms come under the purview of state governments. Each state introduced land reforms independently, resulting in wide variations in land reforms in various states. Implementation of land reforms have been lagging behind in few states as landlords has influence in administration and governance of states. M.K. Gandhi believed that India can achieve meaningful independence only through Gram Swaraj, when villages will be self-governed through elected Gram Panchayats. Members of the First Assembly were not elected mass leaders. Most of them were bureaucrats, industrialists, and landlords, highly educated and leaders of Congress. These people had poor understanding of issues of farmers. But they were in a hurry to bring land reforms. They thought Ambedkar's ideas would eradicate farmer problems. However, Ambedkar's thoughts were subsequently sidelined under the pressure of industrialists and landlords who were funding political parties. For instance, tenant farmers in Bengal had to give half of their share of crop to their landlords. At the time of independence, the Tebaga movement started, in which the farmers demanded that the landlord will get no more than 1/3 of the crop produced. The Indian government acknowledged the demand of farmers and drafted a bill to this effect. However, the lobby of landlords and moneylenders influenced the drafting committee and diluted the bill. This bill never saw the light of the day, and the Tebaga movement could not achieve its most pressing demand. The Communist Party of India in Bengal took up the farmers' demand through its Kisan Sabha. The farmers with small holdings in Bengal have been struggling for their rights till date. Farmers of India are in pathetic situation despite of big claims of government about benefits of welfare schemes to farmers. Farmers are economically weak and are compelled to commit suicide. Problems of landless labor have been almost same as were in colonial period. Philosophy and thoughts of Ambedkar are still relevant to bring up struggling oppressed farmers. The government should treat agriculture sector as par with other industrial sector. The government should introduce taxation and insurance in agricultural sector as suggested by Ambedkar. Farmers should be given relaxation, rebates and other benefits in case of loss of crops as being given by the government to industries. A number of state governments have not addressed issue of smallholding and failed to rationalize land distribution. This issue needs to be resolved on the principle and philosophy of Ambedkar on smallholding and land ceiling. Ambedkar criticized the revenue system of the colonial British government for equality in tax regardless of the size of landholdings of farmers. This policy was unfair to small farmers and tenants. Ambedkar felt that tax on agriculture should be progressive as in the case of salaried people and businessmen, that is, farmers having low income from crops must be taxed less and tax slab for farmers with large land holdings must be higher. The underlying motive of his views on agrarian reform was to fight landlordism. The benefit of the land should be shared by all sections of the society, irrespective of caste and creed. The tiller of the soil should be made the owner of the land and the land should not be transferred to non-agriculturists. Land reform is complete only when the tiller is made the owner of the land. Occupied land should not lie uncultivated for several years. Such uncultivated land has to be taken away and given to the landless. While referring to the redistribution of agricultural land through land reform legislations, it is wrong to calculate the per capita land availability by taking into account total population. Such calculation should exclude the people who do not depend on agriculture. The problem of the landless and oppressed masses could be solved only through redistribution of land in an equitable manner. Thus, the foregoing analysis clearly indicates that Ambedkar was a socialist and an all-round social reformer. His views on agrarian reforms were oriented towards social justice and equality. He wanted to establish an egalitarian society and wanted this in the agrarian sector where the reforms are much needed, even today.